similar to before, sense perception through our direct understanding, through inference, we don't see it directly but we can put some steps together, or through authority. These are different ways we can gain knowledge. The problem is that with our own sense perception or with our own inference, that requires us to do the thinking and acquiring, and we are limited. However, if we take from authority, we are never going to be affected by any limitation. That's basically the summary of what we've discussed so far. Okay, now the Vedic literature in itself. The next step to discuss, after understanding that Vedas are... Wait, does anyone have any questions? We should say that before we go further. Anything? Come on. No, you're going to say something? No, sure? No. Nothing? No? Nothing? Okay, perfect. The next step in this is now understanding from the Vedic literature what is the essence of the Vedic literature. If you want to look into the Vedic literature, you can look for lifetimes upon lifetimes upon lifetimes and find it impossible to still complete it all. I think it's the sage Bharadvaja who says to Lord Vishnu, give me a good 100 years, I will study this, and then after that, please come back to me. I need to study this and deeply understand. He studies for 100 years. Lord Vishnu comes again. And then he says, no, give me another 100 years, I'm not finished. And so again, he studies, systematically looking at scripture, understanding, analysing, putting contradictions together, dealing with different interpretations, different views, and he keeps on going like that. And then the Lord comes again. He says, no, give me another 100 years. And the Lord says, look, have you not realised? You can put millions and millions and millions of years into trying to understand everything, because there's that much content. But we will never understand it. That's reality. Our human nature is that this Vedic literature is so vast. If you want to study each and every verse of every Veda, Upanishad, Purana, Itihasa, whatever constitutes that Vedic literature, it will take forever. And so, Jiva Goswami does something very, very nice in his explanation. For those of you more sciencey, mathsy like myself, I'd recommend that you do look into it. And he explains systematically how the Vedas in themselves are very cryptic and very difficult to understand because of how cryptic their nature is. It's described they instruct like a teacher. The teacher just instructs. They don't necessarily look at you as an individual and tell you how you can improve. They just tell it as it is. So this is how the Vedas instruct. The Vedas have something called the Upanishads, which are there to just explain what the Vedas say because the Vedas are so complicated. But that's not enough. And so these things, the Vedas and the Upanishads, these explanations rely on, they're called Shruti, revealed knowledge. And then, after that, there's the derived knowledge, which is the stories, Itihasa, and there's also the descriptions, the Puranas. This is quite technical, but simply take it as the Vedas are very complicated to understand, and so they've been explained through these Itihasas and Puranas, these stories, these historical texts, and also through the Puranas, which also tell stories around important principles. The way it's described is the Vedas are like a teacher, the Puranas are like a friend. A friend will tell you, a teacher will tell you, don't do that, it's wrong. A friend will tell you, don't do that. This time, this guy did it, you don't want to know what happened to him yet, so you don't want to do it. That's how the Puranas tell you. They tell it in a way which actually convinces you and explains to you more than simple Vedic revelations. And so, actually for us, in this age, it's actually recommended to study the Puranas. And of all that, all the Puranas that you can get, there's one which is recommended of the essence of them all, and that is Srimad Bhagavatam, is the Bhagavata Purana. And so, in it, instead of now saying Vedic literature every time, we'll just call it Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the essence, it's the creme de la creme of all of Vedic literature. And so, it explains to us as a friend, and it's also described as a friend, as an instructor, and as a lover. Srimad Bhagavatam explains to you. When a lover explains, you don't care how harsh they say things, because you're in love with them. You will let them say whatever they want, as harsh as they want. This is the nature of love. And so Bhagavatam explains things as a friend, as a teacher, and as a lover. And it explains everything there is to be understood by the essence of all knowledge. So we just talked about earlier how this Vedic literature is a source of knowledge which is valid. But actually the essence of all that validity relies in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which deals with the topmost sublime knowledge. There is description, Nigama kalpataror ghalitam phalam. which means that all these Vedic literature is like a tree. And this tree has given one fruit, one beautiful fruit. And that is the ripened fruits, the essence of that tree, in that fruit, is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so, when we look at all of this, we can spend years and years of understanding. All we can do is simply try and understand what the Bhagavat Puran, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is conveying to us. And in that way we'll understand the essence of the Vedas. And so now we've dealt with how do we know it's valid, and what's its essence, so we can actually practically understand it. We cannot physically understand all of the Vedic texts. Now, the next step is application to our reality that we live in. This modern world, this modern society, all this technology we have, all the new problems we have with the new things that we do, how do we apply it? And I want to ask you a question, which is, discuss amongst yourself, 30 seconds. Are these Vedic texts truly applicable in our present society? And I want a couple arguments for and against after the discussion. So, in a pairs, you can all discuss, are these texts truly applicable in modern circumstances? Go for it.
You want to go first?
Time's up.
Yeah.
I want to hear from each pair, starting with Ashish and Madhav.
You want to go ahead, Sumedh Prabhu?
So we
Nice.
we thought that well four is that the Vedas are eternal knowledge. You know, they can be like applied anywhere. So maybe
Okay, because they don't change.
yeah, they don't change.
They're constant.
They're
Okay,
constant.
nice.
So
So unlike material understanding, they're constant, so therefore they should apply in all circumstances.
yeah, you said that.
Nice, okay. Any against?
Against we had you said they can be cryptic as well. So maybe in this age, when our senses are much more conditioned, we might not be able to understand.
What about the Srimad Bhagavatam? If not the Vedic, because the essence is the Srimad Bhagavatam. Is the Srimad Bhagavatam not fully applicable in nowadays? Any reasons?
Well, maybe certain situations like you can't do it because I guess the world is. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think.
Okay. No, I see what you're trying to say. The world is different.
Yeah,
There
the
are
world
different
is-
circumstances to
Yeah.
5,000 years ago. Okay, interesting. Rajveer Prabhu. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Khalifa.
Okay, both of you two.
So Khalifa says yes.
Yes.
But like I was asking him like loads of questions about the pronoun was and stuff.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Yeah.
But he said for argument's sake no, so I'm gonna let him take it.
I'm just saying no to see
Okay.
what comes back.
Nice. I like that. Okay. Yes.
I think.
I think we said yes.
Yeah, we
It
said
was
yes.
applicable.
Maybe like we didn't understand the no part. We just focused.
Oh, you focused on yes. Okay, fine.
Well, I suppose you could say that it's not. You can't attain to the same level as perhaps you could in the past.
Okay.
Or with the same depth of knowledge, unless you're able to completely detach yourself from all the distraction and all of the saturation of
Present society.
sense
Yeah.
perception that we're currently dealing with.
Okay, nice. Very nice. Drishti Dhruv?
Partially agree.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything. You have to explain. Anyone partially agrees the same as partially disagree. It means nothing.
Yeah, so I think, continuing from what everyone else said, times have changed, we're in Kali Yuga now, and I think it's not so forced upon everyone to chant 16 rounds every day, wear these clothes, head shave, and fire sacrifices, everything. But I think now that technology has changed, we're able to do it in other ways which are more suitable to us. Obviously.
Counters instead of beatbox.
Yeah, exactly, that's an example. Yeah, you can get them downstairs in the shop. So yeah, I think back in the day it was more forced because there wasn't as much to do.
So you think there's more leeway now? Because
Yeah.
we are more conditioned.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
as he said.
Interesting, Drishti?
Yeah, same thing. I think in the Vedas they kind of explain everything that we should be doing, like Sati Yoga, Treta, Dwapara, they give it all. So
Yeah.
it's just you're choosing what part of the Vedas you want to listen to. and still that's very hard to understand if you don't have an acharya telling you the practical application of it the way Srila Prabhupada does.
Yeah, okay. So that's actually quite similar to Madhav's point, which is it might be difficult in current circumstances as well as yours. Okay, good. This is what we want to hear, because if I give you an answer without you having a question, it doesn't hit properly. And so if we churn that, we actually get these answers out. The answer is the Srimad Bhagavatam is perfectly applicable in modern society. So, now looking at the Vedas themselves, the Vedic texts are not perfectly applicable in modern society. Because there are parts of the Vedic texts that deal with fire sacrifices, a very big thing, you know, Vedic rites. They have all these fire sacrifices, you get this fire, this ghee, you have these pure brahmanas, and you get them to do these mantras. They recite it properly, pronouncing all the words properly, each syllable properly done, correct practice in a more ritualistic fashion is done very rigorously. The Srimad Bhagavatam, though, does something very beautiful. And it establishes that it's going to do this at the start. Being the essence of the Vedas, it says, Dharma projita kaitavotra paramaha nirmatsaranam satam. Rejecting all varieties of material religion, material dharma, this Bhagavat Puran propounds the highest truth. So is the Vedas themselves, the Vedic literature itself, is it perfectly applicable to Kali Yuga? Not all of it, but the Srimad Bhagavatam is perfectly applicable, because it deals with the topmost understanding of the highest truth. And it's very practical. Not only is it the highest, but it's also the most practical. Of all Vedic texts, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the most practical, as well as being the highest. There's a very few times you see that the topmost thing is also the most practical thing. Often the best solution is the more difficult one, less practical. But the best solution here is the most practical. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, in its essence, goes through core every single philosophy that you could even think about, analysing it, applying it, looking at various pastimes that have occurred, and recognising how that has acted. And dealing with that, it looks at the highest, deepest philosophy that you can ever imagine, which is the pastimes of Lord Krishna. And in doing so, it establishes one thing as its final conclusion: loving devotional service. Bhakti. And bhakti, as we already know from texts like Bhagavad Gita, is the topmost of all understanding. Bhakti itself is transcendent to karma jnana ashtanga, can take you deeper than the other yoga processes. It is the highest yoga process, and Srimad Bhagavatam deals with that alone. Not only is it more practical, not only is it the topmost, but it's also the sweetest. This Srimad Bhagavatam gives the philosophy, gives the application of it for us in Kali Yuga. So you might think it's watering it down. As Dhruv said, maybe it's not as forced, maybe it's like less, you know, maybe we're doing less because we're more conditioned. But actually that's completely incorrect. This philosophy that it gives is the topmost philosophy without being watered down, but it's still easy. That is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. It does not require you to do all this, especially in the 6th chapter of the Gita, we deal with all this difficult ashtanga. You go to some secluded place. I don't know where you find a secluded place. Maybe you go to the park, Alexandra Park down the road. You don't get any of the forests here, and you know you meditate. You have to sit somewhere where there's no one else on a kusha grass, neither too high nor too low. Erect. I'm looking at everyone's posture here. None of us would pass. Erect, you know, properly with the eyes pointing at the tip of the nose, and you've got to be fully concentrated. No distractions around you. That's already difficult, and you've got to try and practice that. That is a more difficult application, more difficult process, and it's also not the topmost process. The result you get from carrying out devotional service is already what you get from carrying out all other practices. And I'm going to conclude with this verse. I don't know if the internet's working. If it doesn't work, okay, no, it's working. So, this is the conclusion of bhakti, or the essence of bhakti. And it explains bhakti in relation to all of the practices. I'm going to recite line by line, and then we'll discuss the translation. Please repeat after me. Vedeshu yajneshu tapassu chaiva Daneshu yat punya phalam pratishtam Atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva Yogi param sthanam upaiti chadhyam Translation, Drishti.
A person who accepts the path of devotion service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruited activities. Simply by performing devotion service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode.
Jai. This. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these. We like to make spiritual life complicated for ourselves. It's very simple. You go super deep into philosophy, you can understand it, it's very, very complicated topics, but it concludes with this one thing, which is that loving devotional service to the Lord is the topmost thing. So now, we've looked at the Vedic literature, its validity in the present day, we've looked at the essence being Srimad Bhagavatam, and how it's a very simple process to practice. And now, of all this devotional service, you get everything else just by doing it. No extra endeavor necessary. Sweetest, most practical, topmost. What is the best means of practicing devotional service in this present day? Not Yashwant Prabhu. You can't answer this question. Go on. Dhruv? What is the best means of practicing loving devotional service in this day and age?
Chanting.
Chanting the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Seems too easy, right? It is. And, it seems too good to be true, and it is too good to be true. It is, it's crazy. But the potency of the holy name is an irrevocable fact which is established by all the acharyas, all these, these people we're talking about, Jiva Goswami, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Baladev Vidyabhushan. These guys are the greatest scholars. They can understand things that we would never be able to even touch. On such a deep level, we're just like floating on the surface and we think, look at me, I'm so deep. And after doing all of that, what are they doing? They are sitting with a mridanga, with kartals, and they are dancing and chanting the holy names. Because that is the conclusion of all revealed scripture. And you know what? We won't be able to appreciate that conclusion until we take a little journey and understand how, in comparison, surely by breathing exercises you are able to control the mind better. Surely by practicing asanas you'll be able to control the body better, you'll be able to be more healthy. We don't appreciate it unless we look step by step by step, and then we're able to appreciate this conclusion. That everything else you do by practicing devotional service, especially through the chanting of the holy names, is achieved. The way it purifies your thoughts, the way it calms the consciousness, the way it brings stability. And it can be done through not silent, but quiet meditation to oneself, japa on the beads as we'll do now. Or it can be done in a louder, more ecstatic and joyful fashion, in a musical way through kirtan. And the beauty of this chanting of the names of the Lord cannot be simply described in this session alone. I've tried to give a small insight of what is a very deep subject matter and can be researched and studied. PhDs upon PhDs have been written about this, just understanding this philosophy, the way it can be practiced. And so, I'm going to say thank you all very much. And Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.